Did you know that walking into a Brazilian factory without the help of a local professional could cost you your entire investment? Stick around, because what you don't know about factory visits here in Brazil could sour your plans to get your product made. In this video, I'll explain why visiting manufacturers for your product in Brazil by yourself is a gamble that you don't want to take. I'm going to show you why you need a local pro, someone who speaks the language, gets the culture, and who knows your industry code. It's not just about holding your hand, it's about keeping you from stepping on a landmine, of which there's a lot here in Brazil. First up, the language. Now, you might think English is the global default. I'll manage. Think again. Most factory owners here aren't fluent in English, and even if they or their employees are, the real conversations happen in Portuguese. To give you an example, I recently accompanied a client to a series of factory visits across the states of Sao Paulo and Minas Gerais. During some of these meetings, the owners and managers of the factories would break away from speaking in English and switch into Portuguese to communicate between themselves. Now, when that happens, that puts you, the native English speaker who doesn't speak Portuguese, at a disadvantage because you don't know what's being said. Luckily, for my client, every time the people across the table switched languages, I'd immediately start interpreting. I remember that this made one of the factory owners a bit uncomfortable because when he realized that I spoke the language fluently, he began accelerating his speech and using dialect to try to throw me off. Of course, it didn't work because I've been speaking Portuguese in every conceivable situation for over a decade now. So those tricks don't work on me. Also closely related to communication is the translation of situational subtext. What I mean by that is that many of us from the English-speaking world have our own understanding of the way business should be done. For instance, when setting up a meeting, we clarify that we want to meet with the decision makers of the company. We arrive to the meeting on time, we shake hands, no kisses on cheeks, and maybe a minute or two of small talk, and then it's down to business. Now, outside of the more internationalized circles of Faria Lima, which is Brazil's version of Wall Street, you'll find that things happen in Brazil a little differently when you meet with a manufacturer. To give you an example, during that same visit I had with my client that I mentioned before, we'd met with another manufacturer who kept insisting on taking us out to lunch. But because we were running a tight schedule of visiting a few manufacturers across long distances that day, we simply couldn't accommodate his request. So I had to be as polite as possible, apologizing profusely and letting him know that the next time we visited, we'd definitely do lunch and exactly at the place he wanted us to do it. This is what I meant by translating situational subtext. I knew that here in Brazil, when trying to get a relationship off the ground, be it business or personal, the key to moving things forward is to spend a good amount of time together, exchanging stories about one another. This way, the other party gets to figure out what sort of person and relationship they may be getting themselves into. Now, another reason you'd never want to do a factory visit in Brazil without a professional accompanying you has to do with the actual tour of the factory itself. Imagine that you're walking the floor and you notice there's a bunch of workers huddled around a machine. You ask them about it and they just say, it's just routine maintenance. But a seasoned guide knows that cluster of people over there, it's a red flag. Maybe the machine breaks down weekly. Maybe the factory's output is unreliable. Then there's the supply chain. That machine's useless if parts don't show up. Brazil's got roadblocks, both literal and figurative, such as the occasional flooding of transport routes and a bunch of flaky vendors. Now, here's where pros earn their fee. They'll casually ask about seasonal maintenance schedules or training protocols. In other words, they use phrases that get you the truth from the factory owner without making him or her lose face. Because in Brazil, how you ask is just as critical as what you ask. Now, let's talk about money. If you think hiring a local consultant is expensive, well, then you should try footing the bill for a shipment that got delayed because you misjudged the owner's flexible delivery timeline. Or worse, discovering that your exclusive supplier has been subcontracting to uncertified workshops. A pro doesn't just negotiate terms. They know which regions have ongoing union disputes, which factories inflate capacity before peak season, and how to structure payment terms so you don't end up funding their cash flow gaps. It's also helpful to know that Brazilian manufacturers expect you to bring a local heavyweight into the meeting. If you show up alone, you're just asking for trouble. It'd be like arriving at a poker game and asking for the rules. They, the manufacturers, will assume that you're unprepared and they'll adjust their terms accordingly. So, should you avoid Brazilian manufacturers altogether? Absolutely not. Brazil's manufacturing capabilities, especially in the food industry, are a largely undiscovered gem in the world. But does that mean you should walk into their plants unprepared? That's like trading your briefcase for a blindfold. A pro isn't just your translator, they're also your cultural and business insurance. They'll know when to push, and here's a hint, you never want to push a manufacturer on the Friday before Carnival. Your professional guide will also know when to back off. You see, they won't just be fixing mistakes, they'll be stopping them before they happen. So, how do you go about finding such a guide? Well, you could find interpreters on local job boards such as 99 Freelers, Get Ninjas, or the National Union of Translators and Interpreters called Sintra, although none of these resources have English language support. And you could find professionals who are knowledgeable in the industry that you're interested in, either through LinkedIn or through any one of the local associations that cater to your business. For example, there's ABICI, which is the Brazilian Coffee Industry Association. You'd also want someone who does this for a living, so they're always available to you. Unfortunately, there aren't many of these folks around. But fortunately, that's why I offer this service. With over a decade of knowledge and experience that spans many sectors, I'm able to not only accompany you to meetups with manufacturers, but I also plan your entire trip from hotel bookings to car rentals to itinerary and internal travel route planning. I handle a lot of these hidden risks so that you don't have to. Now, if you found this video helpful, why not bless me with a like and subscribe so I'll know to keep making more useful content for you to enjoy.